Sometimes, a single act of kindness can unravel the deepest secrets of our past. What begins as a moment of compassion can transform into a journey that questions everything we thought we knew about fate, identity, and the invisible threads that connect our lives. This is the story of Marcus Chen, a successful art dealer in Manhattan, whose spontaneous decision to help a struggling street vendor would lead him down a path he never imagined, one that would force him to confront a truth buried 23 years ago, a truth that would shatter his carefully constructed world and reveal that some coincidences are far too deliberate to be accidental. Before we dive into this incredible story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love connecting with viewers from all around the world. And if you enjoy stories that keep you on the edge of your seat with unexpected twists, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming stories. Trust us, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. The November rain hammered against the glass windows of the Chen Gallery on Madison Avenue, creating rivers that distorted the view of the Friday evening rush hour outside. Marcus Chen stood inside, adjusting the spotlight on a newly acquired piece, a provocative abstract painting by an emerging Brooklyn artist that he'd purchased for $75,000. At 41, Marcus had built his reputation on taking calculated risks, on seeing potential where others saw chaos. His gallery had become a destination for collectors who trusted his eye, his instinct for discovering talent before it exploded into the mainstream art market. He checked his Rolex, 6:15. His assistant, Jennifer, had already left for the weekend, and the gallery would close in 15 minutes. Through the rain-streaked window, Marcus noticed something unusual across the street. A woman, perhaps in her early 60s, sat huddled under a tattered golf umbrella next to a folding table displaying what appeared to be handmade jewelry. Her clothes were soaked, her gray hair plastered to her face, but she remained there, attempting to protect her modest display from the downpour. Marcus had seen plenty of street vendors in Manhattan. The city was full of people trying to make ends meet, each with their own story of struggle. Usually, he walked past them with the practiced indifference of someone who'd lived in New York long enough to develop a protective shell. But something about this woman caught his attention. Perhaps it was the dignity in how she sat, spine straight despite her circumstances, or the careful way she tried to shield her jewelry from the rain, as if each piece held immeasurable value. He made a decision. Grabbing his umbrella and overcoat, Marcus locked the gallery and crossed the wet street, dodging a taxi that honked aggressively at his jaywalking. Up close, the woman looked exhausted, her hands trembling slightly from the cold, carefully rearranged necklaces made from colorful beads and wire. The craftsmanship was surprisingly delicate, nothing like the mass-produced trinkets usually sold on street corners. "Excuse me," Marcus said, crouching slightly to meet her eyes. "How much for everything you have here?" The woman looked up, startled. Her eyes were a striking pale blue, almost translucent, and for a moment, Marcus felt an inexplicable jolt of recognition, though he was certain he'd never seen her before. Those eyes held something beyond exhaustion, a depth of experience, of loss perhaps, that seemed disproportionate even for someone in her situation. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice raspy, as if she hadn't spoken much that day. "Your jewelry, all of it. How much would you want for the entire collection?" She blinked, confusion crossing her weathered face. "Sir, why would you want all of it?" "Because it's cold. It's raining, and you should be somewhere warm, and because I can." Marcus pulled out his wallet. $500. "Will that cover it?" The woman's eyes widened. Her lips trembled, and for a moment, Marcus thought she might cry. Instead, she straightened further, a flash of pride crossing her features. "That's too much. These pieces are worth maybe $200, at most." "Then consider it an investment in an artist," Marcus replied, surprising himself with his own earnestness. "I own an art gallery. I recognize quality work when I see it." After a long moment, she nodded slowly. "All right. Thank you. You're very kind." As Marcus counted out the bills, the woman began carefully packing her jewelry into a worn cloth bag. Her movements were methodical, reverent even. "What's your name?" Marcus asked. "Elena," she said quietly. "Elena Morrison. I'm Marcus Chen. Do you live nearby, Elena? Can I call you a cab?" "I'll manage," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. The truth was obvious. She probably couldn't afford a cab, and wherever she lived, it likely wasn't close or comfortable. Marcus made another impulsive decision. "I have a storage unit in my gallery's basement, just space I'm not using. If you need somewhere to work to keep your supplies dry, you're welcome to use it. No rent. Consider it part of the deal. Elena's pale blue eyes locked onto his with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. Maybe that's exactly why, Marcus said. No expectations, no complications, just one person helping another. Is that so strange? A complex expression flickered across Elena's face, something between gratitude and what almost looked like grief. No, she whispered, not strange, just unexpected. They exchanged phone numbers, and Marcus gave her the gallery's address, telling her to come by on Monday morning. As he walked back to his gallery, the bag of jewelry feeling lighter than it should in his hand, Marcus couldn't shake the lingering feeling that this encounter meant something more than a simple act of charity. Those eyes, why did they haunt him? That night, in his upscale apartment overlooking Central Park, Marcus examined Elena's jewelry under better light. Each piece was unique, displaying a mastery of technique that shouldn't belong to someone selling on street corners. The color combinations were sophisticated, the wire work intricate. One necklace in particular caught his attention, a stunning piece with midnight blue beads arranged in a pattern that somehow evoked both sadness and hope. His wife, Vanessa, a corporate lawyer who worked 80-hour weeks, was away on business in Chicago. Their 12-year marriage had become more of a partnership than a romance. Two busy professionals sharing an address and little else. They'd never had children. Vanessa's choice, which Marcus had accepted without much resistance. He'd learned long ago not to push for things that Vanessa had already decided against. Marcus tried to sleep, but found himself restless. He kept thinking about Elena Morrison, about the contradiction she represented. Her circumstances suggested failure, but her bearing and her craft suggested someone who had once known better days. Who was she? What had brought her to that rain-soaked corner? Monday morning arrived with clear skies and unseasonably warm November weather. Marcus reached the gallery at 8:30, earlier than usual. He'd spent the weekend thinking about how to set up the basement space for Elena, cleaning out boxes, bringing down a work table and chair, even installing a small heater. Jennifer had given him a knowing look when he'd asked her to pick up some basic craft supplies, but she'd said nothing. Elena arrived at 9 o'clock sharp. She'd cleaned up considerably. Her gray hair was neatly pulled back, and she wore a simple but clean navy dress under a worn coat. She carried a large canvas bag that clearly held her supplies, and perhaps her entire possessions. "You came," Marcus said, surprised at his own relief. "You said Monday morning," Elena replied. "I keep my word." He showed her the basement space. It was nothing fancy. Concrete walls, fluorescent lighting, a bit cold despite the heater, but it was dry and secure. Elena's eyes misted as she looked around. "This is more than I expected," she said softly. "Much more." Over the following weeks, an unexpected routine developed. Elena would arrive each morning around 9, work on her jewelry in the basement, and leave around 5. She was quiet, almost invisible, never imposing on Marcus's business upstairs. But gradually, Marcus found himself going downstairs more often, bringing coffee, asking about her work, simply talking. He learned that she'd been living in a shelter in the Bronx, that she'd been homeless for 2 years following a series of devastating events she wouldn't elaborate on. She'd grown up in Pennsylvania, had been married once, a long time ago, she said with a faraway look. She never mentioned children, and Marcus didn't ask. Some topics felt too raw, too personal for their still developing friendship. Elena, despite her circumstances, possessed remarkable intelligence and culture. She could discuss literature, classical music, art history. Once, when Marcus was struggling with a particularly difficult artist negotiation, Elena had offered an insight about human psychology that proved invaluable. "People don't want what they think they want," she'd said. "They want to feel seen. Make him feel understood, and he'll sign." It had worked perfectly. As December approached, Marcus found himself increasingly invested in Elena's well-being. He'd raised her rent-free arrangement to include a small stipend for consulting on artistic matters, a fiction they both maintained, though Elena surely knew it was charity. She accepted with dignity, working harder on her jewelry, producing pieces of increasing beauty and complexity. Jennifer, his assistant, had taken to Elena as well. "She has good energy," Jennifer said one afternoon. "Sad, but good. Like she's carrying something heavy, but won't let it crush her." Marcus's wife, Vanessa, during one of her rare appearances at the gallery, had been less enthusiastic. "You're running a charity now?" she'd asked, her tone dripping with skepticism. "How very noble of you, Marcus. Just make sure your street artist doesn't steal anything valuable." The comment had angered Marcus more than it should have. "Her name is Elena, and she has more integrity than most of the wealthy collectors who walk through that door." Vanessa had simply shrugged, already back on her phone, already mentally checked out of the conversation, and perhaps their marriage. One evening in mid-December, Marcus was working late on paperwork when he heard a soft sound from the basement. Someone crying. He found Elena at her work table, shoulders shaking, clutching a partially completed necklace. She quickly wiped her eyes when she saw him. "I'm sorry," she said. "I thought you'd gone home." "What's wrong, Elena?" She shook her head. "Just memories. This time of year is difficult." Marcus pulled up a chair. "Want to talk about it?" For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, quietly, "I had a son, a long time ago. I lost him when he was just a baby. December marks another year without him, another Christmas, another birthday I'll never celebrate." The pain in her voice was so raw, so devastating, that Marcus felt his throat tighten. "I'm so sorry. What happened?" "It's complicated," Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was very young. Just 23. I wasn't married. The father and we weren't together. It was 1986, and things were different then. My parents, they had plans for me. Plans that didn't include a baby with no father in the picture." She paused, her hands trembling. "They convinced me, no, they forced me, to give him up for adoption. They said it was best for everyone, that I was too young, that the baby would have a better life with a proper family." Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. "How old was he?" 3 weeks. They let me hold him for 3 weeks. Elena's voice broke. "Then they took him. I never even got to choose his new family. My parents handled everything. They told me to move on, to forget, that I'd made the right choice." "But how do you forget your own child? How do you move on from that? Did you ever try to find him?" "When he turned 18, yes. I hired a private investigator, but the adoption records were sealed. I hit wall after wall. Then life fell apart in other ways. My husband, I married eventually, tried to build a normal life. He died in a car accident 7 years ago. After that, everything unraveled. I had a breakdown, lost my job, lost my home, lost everything except the guilt and the wondering. What if? What if? Every day, every single day, I think about him. Is he happy? Does he ever wonder about his birth mother? Does he hate me for giving him up?" Marcus's mind was racing, fragments of thoughts colliding. "When's his birthday?" "Your son's birthday, December 19th. He'd be 38 now, 38 years, and I've never stopped looking for him in every face I see on the street. December 19th, Marcus's birthday. He was 38 years old. Born in 1986, adopted as an infant." The room seemed to tilt. Marcus gripped the edge of the table. "Elena, where were you living in 1986? "Pennsylvania. Outside Philadelphia." "Why? What was the adoption agency called?" Elena looked at him strangely. I don't remember the exact name. Something with family in it. New Beginnings Family Services, I think." "Marcus, why are you asking these questions?" Marcus's heart was pounding so hard he could barely breathe. "Because I was born on December 19th, 1986. Because I was adopted as an infant. Because my adoptive parents told me I came from an agency in Pennsylvania." The color drained from Elena's face. She stood up abruptly, knocking over her chair. No, that's impossible. Marcus, there were thousands of adoptions. The chances— What else do you remember? Any details about the baby's father?" Elena's hands were shaking violently now. "He was Chinese, first-generation American. His parents owned a restaurant in Philadelphia's Chinatown. We met at community college. His family disapproved even more than mine. They wanted him to marry within the Chinese community, to take over the family business. When I got pregnant, he tried to help, but his parents threatened to disown him. And my parents, they said I was ruining my life, ruining their reputation. They said no one would want me with a biracial baby." Marcus felt tears streaming down his face. "My adoptive parents, they were Chinese, Michael and Lily Chen. They couldn't have children of their own. They specifically requested a Chinese or biracial child, because they wanted me to have some connection to their heritage." "This can't be real," Elena whispered. "This can't be happening. Do you have any proof? Any documents? Anything from the adoption?" "My parents destroyed everything. They wanted me to forget. They wanted all evidence gone. But I kept one thing. One small thing they never found." Elena's hands were shaking as she reached into her bag, pulling out a worn wallet. From a hidden compartment, she extracted a tiny, faded photograph. "They took a Polaroid at the hospital. Just one. A nurse smuggled it to me. My parents never knew I kept it." She handed it to Marcus with trembling hands. The photograph showed a young woman, clearly Elena, decades younger, holding a tiny infant wrapped in a blue blanket. But what made Marcus's breath catch was the hospital bracelet visible on the baby's wrist. He could barely make out the words through the aged photo grain. "Baby boy Morrison, Dob, 12/19/86. I need to know," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "We need to be sure. DNA test. Will you do a DNA test with me?" Elena nodded, tears streaming down her face. Yes. Oh God, Marcus, could it really be you? All this time could I have been making jewelry in the basement of my own son's gallery? They stood there for a long moment, neither quite able to process what was happening. Then impulsively, Marcus reached out and took Elena's hand. It was the first time they'd touched beyond a handshake. Her hand was cold, trembling, but she gripped his tightly, as if he might disappear. The rain, Marcus said suddenly. That day in the rain, I kept thinking your eyes looked familiar. Those pale blue eyes. My adoptive mother always said I had my birth mother's eyes. She'd seen a note in my adoption file. I gave you my eyes, Elena whispered, staring at his face, as if seeing it for the first time. And your father, he gave you his cheekbones, his hair. You look like both of us. How did I not see it before? Because people see what they expect to see, and no one expects a miracle to be sitting under a broken umbrella on Madison Avenue. The DNA test results took 5 agonizing days. Marcus told no one except Jennifer, who'd become almost family over her 8 years working for him. He didn't tell Vanessa. His wife was so absent from his life that she didn't even notice his distraction. He spent those 5 days researching everything he could about forced adoptions in the 1980s, reading stories of mothers who'd been coerced by family and societal pressure, stories that made him furious and heartbroken. He also spent hours with Elena, asking careful questions, afraid to hope too much. She told him about his biological father, James Liu, who died in the late 90s from cancer. They'd lost touch after the adoption, the trauma too great for their young relationship to survive. She told him about the 3 weeks she'd had with him as a baby, how he'd been alert and curious, how he'd gripped her finger with surprising strength. I sang to you, she said one evening, her eyes distant with memory. A song my grandmother taught me, Blackbird, the Beatles. I must have sung it 100 times. Marcus felt goosebumps rise on his arms. My adoptive mother, before she died 6 years ago, she told me I used to hum that song as a child. She never knew where I'd learned it. She said it was a mystery. When the DNA results finally came, Marcus was in his office upstairs. Elena was in the basement. He opened the email with shaking hands. The document was clinical, full of scientific terminology, but the conclusion was clear. 99.97% probability of paternity match. Elena Morrison is the biological mother of Marcus Chen. He printed the results and walked downstairs, his legs feeling weak. Elena looked up from her work, saw his face, and stood immediately. He handed her the paper without a word. She read it once, twice, then slowly sank back into her chair. It's you, she breathed. It's really you, my baby, my son. Marcus couldn't speak. The emotion was too overwhelming. Joy, grief, anger, wonder, all crashing together in a wave that left him unable to do anything but nod. Then Elena stood, and they embraced, and both of them broke down completely. They cried for the lost years, for the 3 weeks and 38 years of separation, for the twisted path that had somehow brought them back together, for the cruelty of the circumstances that had torn them apart, and the impossible mercy that had reunited them. I looked for you in every face, Elena sobbed against his shoulder. Every day. Every man I passed on the street. I wondered if it was you, and you were right there, across the street, and I didn't know. I didn't know. I bought your jewelry out of pity, Marcus said, his voice choked with tears. I thought I was being charitable to a stranger. I had no idea I was bringing my own mother into my life. When they finally separated, both emotionally exhausted, Elena cupped his face in her hands, studying every detail. You're so handsome, so accomplished. Your parents, your adoptive parents, they did a wonderful job raising you. I can see that. They gave you everything I couldn't. They were good people, Marcus agreed. They loved me. But there was always a hole, Elena, always something missing, a question I didn't know how to ask. Over the following weeks, they began to cautiously build a relationship. Not the mother-son relationship they'd lost. That was gone forever. Those crucial years unrecoverable. But something new, something precious in its own way. They had lunch together. Marcus learned about Elena's life, the full story of her struggles. After giving him up, she'd tried to bury the pain in work, eventually becoming a graphic designer. A career she'd been good at until her husband's death triggered the breakdown that cost her everything. I see now, she told him one day, that I was punishing myself for giving you away. I never forgave myself. So when my life fell apart, some part of me felt like I deserved it, like it was payment for my sin. It wasn't a sin, Marcus said firmly. You were pressured, forced. You were a victim of circumstances and other people's prejudices. Maybe, but I still made the choice. I still signed the papers. Marcus also learned that Elena had tried to take her own life twice in the years after her husband's death, once in 2019 and again in 2022. The second attempt had been just a year before Marcus found her on that rainy street. The revelation shook him to his core. He could have lost her before ever knowing who she was. "I'm glad you survived," he told her, holding her hands tightly. "I'm so glad you're here." "Maybe I was meant to," Elena said softly. "Maybe I had to survive long enough for that rainy day, for you to walk across the street." Marcus moved Elena out of the shelter and into a small but comfortable apartment in Queens. He covered the rent, furnished it, made sure she had everything she needed. Elena protested at first. "I don't want you to feel obligated." But Marcus was insistent. "You're my mother. Let me take care of you. Please, let me do what I couldn't do for 38 years. His relationship with Vanessa, already fragile, finally shattered completely. When he told her the truth about Elena, something he'd put off for weeks, her reaction was cold and dismissive. "So you found your birth mother. That's nice, Marcus. But don't expect me to play happy family. I have no interest in adopting a charity case." "She's not a charity case. She's my mother. She's a homeless woman who got lucky, and you're being emotionally manipulated." The divorce papers were filed in January. Vanessa kept the apartment. Marcus didn't care. He moved into a smaller place in the West Village, and for the first time in years he felt lighter. The marriage had been dead long before Elena entered his life, but Elena had given him the courage to finally acknowledge it. By spring, Elena had started selling her jewelry through the gallery. Marcus set up a small display in the front window, curated with his professional eye. The pieces sold immediately. Collectors who came in for the paintings found themselves drawn to the jewelry, to the evident emotion woven into each piece. Elena's work began fetching hundreds, then thousands of dollars. "You're doing this because I'm your mother," Elena protested one day, after a particularly profitable week. "I'm doing this because you're talented," Marcus corrected. "I would never compromise the gallery's reputation with inferior work, mother or not. You create art that moves people. That's what I sell." One evening in May, almost exactly 6 months after that rainy November day, Marcus and Elena sat in the gallery after hours, drinking wine and looking at her latest collection. She'd created a series inspired by their reunion, pieces that incorporated blue and gray beads in patterns that suggested rain, serendipity, hope emerging from darkness. "I've been thinking about something," Elena said. "About that day, the rain, the umbrella, the fact that you happened to look out the window at exactly the right moment. What are the odds, Marcus? What are the odds that in a city of 8 million people, on a random Friday evening, you would be the one person to stop?" "Astronomical," Marcus admitted. "Impossible, really. Do you believe in fate? In things being meant to happen?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "I used to think life was random, chaos and probability and nothing more. But now, after this, I don't know what I believe anymore. Maybe some things are too perfectly aligned to be pure chance." "I looked for you for 38 years. Elena said softly. "I spent hundreds of hours with private investigators, thousands of dollars I didn't have on searches that went nowhere. And in the end, you found me. You walked across a street in the rain because you felt pity for a stranger. And that stranger was the person I'd been searching for my entire adult life. The person I'd been searching for without knowing it," Marcus added. "I always felt incomplete. My therapist used to say I had abandonment issues. I thought it was because my adoptive father was emotionally distant. But maybe it was always about you. About the missing piece." Elena's eyes filled with tears, something that still happened often. Usually tears of happiness now, rather than grief. "I wasted so much time feeling guilty, feeling like I didn't deserve to be happy. And then you appeared, not as my baby, but as a grown man, successful and kind, who bought jewelry from a woman in the rain out of simple human compassion. You saved me, Marcus. In every way a person can be saved. You saved me too," Marcus replied. "I just didn't know I needed saving until I met you." They sat in comfortable silence, mother and son, watching the city lights flicker outside the gallery windows. 23 years of separation behind them, a lifetime of new memories ahead. In the end, Marcus reflected, the most extraordinary thing wasn't the statistical impossibility of their reunion. It wasn't the timing or the location or the rain that had brought him to the window. The most extraordinary thing was that he'd recognized something in Elena's eyes that day. Something his heart had known even when his mind didn't. Some connection too deep for logic, too ancient for explanation. He'd bought her jewelry out of pity. He'd offered her the basement out of generosity. But from that first moment, From that first glance across a rain-soaked street, some part of him had known, had felt the pull of blood, of belonging, of a bond that 38 years and sealed adoption records couldn't erase. "What are you thinking?" Elena asked, watching him with those pale blue eyes. His eyes. "I'm thinking about all the times in my life when I almost took a different path. The job offer in Los Angeles I almost accepted that would have moved me away from New York. The day I almost kept the gallery closed because of bad weather. The 100 small decisions that kept me here. In this place, at this time. It's like everything in my life was conspiring to bring me to that window, to that rainy street, to you." "Maybe it was," Elena said. "Or maybe we make our own meaning from chaos. Either way, I'm grateful for the rain, for your kindness, for this impossible, beautiful second chance." Marcus raised his wine glass. "To second chances, to rainy days and broken umbrellas and miracles on Madison Avenue." Elena clinked her glass against his. "To finding what we never knew we'd lost, to finding each other." Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm. Millions of people. Millions of stories, millions of connections waiting to be made or remade, and in a small gallery in Manhattan, a son and his mother sat together, marveling at the impossible journey that had brought them home to each other. The DNA test had confirmed what their hearts somehow already knew. Marcus Chen and Elena Morrison weren't strangers brought together by chance. They were family, separated by time and circumstance and the cruelty of forced choices, but never truly disconnected. The blood that ran in his veins had always been hers. The eyes he looked through had always carried her vision. The heart that beat in his chest had always remembered, somewhere in its deepest chambers, the sound of her voice singing "Blackbird" in the first 3 weeks of his life. He'd broken down when he discovered who she was in the past, but the tears weren't just grief for lost time. They were also relief. The relief of finally understanding that the emptiness he'd carried his entire life had a name, a face, a reason. And more importantly, they were tears of gratitude, because against all odds, against all probability, that emptiness had been filled, not by finding Elena in a file or through an agency, or with the help of private investigators who'd failed so many times before, but by the simplest, most human of actions, looking out a window, seeing someone in need, and choosing to help, choosing kindness over indifference, choosing to see the humanity in a stranger's struggle. That choice, that moment of compassion, had given them both back something precious they thought was lost forever. It had given them each other. And as the evening deepened and the city lights sparkled like the beads in Elena's jewelry, Marcus Chen understood that this was the truest art he'd ever been part of. Not the paintings on his walls or the sculptures in his gallery, but this, the restoration of something beautiful that had been broken, the creation of something new from the fragments of something old. His mother was alive. He'd found her. She'd survived long enough to be found. And in a city famous for its millions of anonymous faces passing each other without connection, they'd seen each other, really seen each other. And in that seeing, they'd both finally come home.